Last Shabbat, Rabbi Hara Person, Rabbi Judy Schindler, and I visited Ilana and Eyal Kaminka at their home in Tzur Hadassah, a town not far from Jerusalem. Their son, Yanai, of blessed memory, was killed by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, and we were paying a condolence call. The Kaminkas are members of Congregation Shir Chadash, a Reformed congregation where Yanai celebrated his bar mitzvah some 7 years ago. On our visit, which followed Shabbat morning services at Shir Chadash, we were accompanied by Yael Schweig and Naomi Ben-Ari, two Israeli Reform rabbinic students who are also members of the congregation and friends of the Kaminka family. Yanai was lieutenant in the Israel Defense Force. He would have turned 21 during Shloshim, the 30-day mourning period after his death. On October 7th, Yanai was serving at the Army's Zikim training base, adjacent to a kibbutz by the same name. Guard posts on the base that morning were staffed by basic trainees under Yanai's command. Yanai quickly perceived the danger and ordered all the trainees to shelter. Officers and sergeants would take their places. One of the sergeants was hit, and Yanai rushed to her aid and to provide backup. Yanai was killed alongside 6 others, only one a trainee. 90 trainees and 30 civilians on the base were saved by their heroism, as was the entire population of Kibbutz Zikim. My teacher, Micha Goodman, says that on October 7th, the state of Israel did not exist. Israelis were there, but the state was not. Soldiers were there, but the Israel Defense Force was not. The state broke its contract with its citizens. Above all, those who have bravely made their homes and built their lives within and near Israel's internationally recognized borders, including communities adjacent to Gaza and Lebanon. Civilians waited in their safe rooms for hours, for some more than a day, for the army to arrive. Too many were killed or kidnapped as they waited. Where was the IDF? In the occupied West Bank, protecting Israeli settlers, including extremists who established their settlements illegally. Where was the government? Consumed with a tactic previously well known only in Latin America, intent on an auto coup, transforming their democratic election into an autocracy free from judicial review. Where was Prime Minister Netanyahu, whose long-standing promise to Israelis has been that he, and only he, could keep them safe? He was and remains consumed with keeping himself out of jail, despite several indictments on corruption charges. And now he's also busy deflecting responsibility for October 7th, for that catastrophe which he deflects from himself onto his subordinates. But soldiers like Yanai were there on October 7th, and they saved lives. Imagine how many more lives could have been saved if brigades had not been moved from the Gaza border to the West Bank in the days, weeks, and months leading up to what Israelis are calling the Black Shabbat. I had been in Israel twice in 2023 before my visit in the last week. After I returned, both in February and in July, I told you about the extraordinary Israeli protest movement. From January through September, hundreds of thousands of Israelis took to the street every Saturday night to protest the Netanyahu government's anti-democratic judicial coup, or, put another way, to stand up for democracy in the Jewish state. Throughout those 9 months, Israelis demonstrated that if the government would not protect the state of Israel, the people would. It was the most powerful demonstration of Zionism that I had ever seen. Old though I be, I was not yet born in the state's early days, and I was a small child at the time of the Six-Day War. Now, though, Israelis would dedicate themselves to preserving the founders' dreams. Our Torah portion this week begins as Jacob leaves the Promised Land, seeking refuge from his brother Esau, who has flown into a murderous rage after Jacob tricked their father into giving him a blessing intended for Esau. Isaac has dispatched Jacob to find refuge with his uncle Laban. In time of trouble, one appeals first to family. In so many ways throughout the 7 weeks, Israelis have been able to turn to their family, to the extraordinary Israeli people, if not to their government, and to our Jewish people around the world. On October 7th, before the army even reached some of the communities that had been attacked, and with Hamas terrorists still in the country, the protest movement mobilized to meet the needs of the survivors. It has never stopped. One-time protesters now provide the infrastructure, the organizing capacity, and much of the human capital behind the extraordinary effort to keep the hostages at the top of the national agenda, apparent government indifference notwithstanding. Throughout our visit, my colleagues and I repeatedly heard about how the state had not come through for survivors, for evacuees, for hostages and their families. Israelis are stepping in to fill the gaps. Our little group was privileged to join our Reform rabbinic colleagues at Moshav Beit Ezra, not much more than 15 miles from the northern border of the Gaza Strip. There, we spent a few hours pruning and weeding in a hothouse filled with tomato plants. We had responded to an agriculture emergency call-up, an effort styled after military mobilizations. This one intended to save Israel's farms from the disaster of losing their workforce on October 7th. That work will need to be sustained for many months to come. In 2023, first with democracy demonstrations and now with volunteerism, Israelis have demonstrated that they are up to the task for the long term. Eyal Kaminka, the father of Yanai of blessed memory, is a management consultant who formerly served as director of the International School for Holocaust Studies at Yad Vashem. He is also a poet. Yanai had turned the last line of one of his father's poems into a personal motto, Rak Bailaila Oim Kochavim. Only at night can one see stars. An ironic smile creeps across Ilana Kaminka's face as she describes that she has always urged her 4 children never to get a tattoo. Now, though, she receives constant WhatsApp messages from Yanai's friends and admirers, sending photos of that motto now tattooed on their arms. We are living at what has become a dark time for our Jewish people in Israel and around the world. Thankfully, we can see the stars. They are the people of the state of Israel. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. Let the people of Israel continue to shine through this darkest hour. Amen.